Hey, it's Dan, and welcome to Unified Gaming. So in this one, I want to share with you my Necromancer PvP build, Corruption. This thing is designed to be a massive pain in the neck by debuffing people, really preventing their healing, and it's a lot of fun. This works really well in group play as well as in BGs and in 1v1s. As always, if you like my content, then obviously like, comment, share and subscribe so you can see the full up gameplay that will come very, very soon. I also want to say a massive thank you to all the people on Patreon who help make the videos possible. If you want to support myself there, there's details down below. So what are we doing on this build? For our race, we are a Dark Elf. A Dark Elf is one of the better PvP races because you get access to flame resist, which helps being a vampire. If you're unaware, being a vampire is kind of like meta because it makes you really tanky even when you've got lower resistance values. We also have weapon and spell damage, and we also get this max resource. So Dark Elf is probably the best race for this build. That said, any race will work in all honesty, they're more of a flavour, but if you want to min-max, a Dark Elf is the way to go. For my attribute points, we have 16 in health and 48 in stamina. We are also using Death Dealer's Feet, so those resource pools will increase by about another 4 or 5k. So we do have like 28, 29k stam fully buffed and 35k health. So don't be too alarmed if the resource pools seem a bit low to begin with. We also use the Lava Mundus for penetration. This is one of the better Munduses and is well worth using. If you are playing no CP Battlegrounds, for example, I would recommend changing this to the Serpent to give you a bit more sustain, and as you get more familiar with the build, go back to the Lava. We are a Vampire Stage 3. With being a Vampire Stage 3, it gives us access to the Undeath passive. This reduces our damage taken by up to 30% based on our missing health. Yes, we take more fire damage, but we're a Dark Elf, so we offset that, and then the Undeath ends up being a net gain anyway, even against fire damage. So Dark Elf plus Vampirism is very, very good. The other two passives we don't really use in all honesty, but you can have them if you want. As for the consumables, I use health and regen food, so smoked bear haunch or jaws of Misrule. This will give you max health and then stam and mag recovery, which are really key because you need both resource pools on this build. Your magic is used for healing a lot with what we have to do, and you also need stam recovery for damage. If you can't afford this, use Jaws of Misrule. It's a cheaper version and almost identical. For the potions, we use tri-stat potions. They're kind of a staple on my builds. It's health, magic and stamina. If you're low on one of those, you're probably going to die, so this will really get you out of trouble. That said, if you are in Cyrodiil, you could use immovability potions or detect potions if you fight a lot of Nightblades. As for the skills and what we are doing here, we are using dual wield today. So we have twin slashes and we morph this to blood craze. This is the better morph in my opinion. It's less damage, but you get a heal, and that heal you can put on multiple people, which will really help add up quick. So if we chuck it on this one here, we'll get this little heal over time every 2 seconds. If you put it on other things, you'll start to see that this ends up proccing quite quickly. So you'll see now all those healing numbers just keep coming in really fast. So if you're in Cyrodiil, you can obviously chuck this on guards and get loads of free healing. If you're in IC, on ads, if you're fighting large groups, just chuck on lots of people. It lasts 20 seconds. It's a very, very good skill. We then have Blighted Blast Bones. This is like the staple of the build. This will give them Major and Minor Defile, which reduces their healing. It is very good. Major is 12% and Minor is, I think it's 8% or 6%, so it's like 18-20% reduction, which is really, really noticeable. We then have Whirling Blades, which is our Execute. If you want to go more of a thematic route with this, which I know some people really like, you could go down to Bone Tyrant and use Rune Scythe. This will give you similar damage as you see, but you don't have the Execute. You do get Hemorrhaging, which is nice, and you do get a heal. So if you need more healing power without having to execute people, swap it over. It's cheaper to run, you get healing, you get an extra dot because of the status effect. If you are obviously trying to burst people and execute, you probably want Whirling Blades, especially for group play. I then use Spirit Guardian. This is a heal over time and it's a 10% mitigation. We don't really use this for the heal. So if you are trying to sort of use this as a heal, it's not that job. This will give you just damage reduction, which is really nice, and it procs some of our passives. It will proc, the one down here. It procs the Last Grasp and the Live and Death passive. So Undeath Confederate, you get 200 mag and stam recovery whilst this is on. So chuck that, that's 200 regen instantly. And in the Living Death, you also proc access to near death experience. So while you have a Living Death ability slotted, your crit chance on all healing abilities increased by up to 20% in proportion to the severity of the target's wounds. So by having this on the front bar and resistant flesh in the back bar, you get this passive always on, which means our heal over times crit a lot, especially when we're low health, which really helps keep us alive. We then have Race Against Time as a movement skill, gives us minor force as well, and it gets rid of snares. I then use Dawnbreaker of Smiting. This is our stun, it's got a dot, it hits really hard. As with these tooltips, these do go up when we are fully buffed with damage, so don't be alarmed there. For the back bar, we use Beckoning Armour. This is a armor buff, it also pulls enemies to us. If you want more sustain, you can change it to Summoner's Armour, which will make Blast Bones and Spirit Guardian cheaper. I then use Resistant Flesh as our burst heal. This does hit us with Minor Defile, sadly, which I know a lot of people are like, oh really? But when we have a negative effect on you, we get 8% more healing. So when we cast this, we offset the Minor Defile anyway. So this is fine. What's also really good is it gives us a lot of resistance. In Imperial City and in Cyrodiil, I crit for like 10, 11,000 with this, so it's like 5k armor, which means we get really tanky really fast when we use the skill. We then have Elemental Susceptibility. This gives Major Breach, it procs one of our sets, it procs Burning Shield and Concussed. As a Necromancer, you get more damage with damage over time and status effects, so that procs that. So you end up getting some really good damage out of this. We then use a Resolving Vigor as another heal over time and Minor Resolve. And for our damage buff, we use Degeneration. It's a free dot basically, and it gives us our weapon and spell damage buff. We then use Temporal Guard on the back bar for minor protection to be more tankier when we are lower health. With all of that combined, when we are low health and we buff up with our resistances, we've got 27,000 spell, almost in 26 physical. When we cast the Resistant Flesh and we get a crit, it's like 10k, that's now another 5,000, so now it's 31,000 spell, 30,000, almost 31,000 physical, so we are tanky on this. Plus we have the 10% from the Ghost, which is 10% damage reduction, and we have minor protection, which is another 5% reduction, and we're a vampire. So when we are low health and we are using our heals, we are tanky. We have a lot of defense. As for the sustain and so on, I'll show you that in a moment. I just want to touch upon the CP first though. For the champion points, we use Focus Mending. This is a must and you have to run this. We then use Master at Arms, Ironclad and Jawless Rebuff. This build is focused on outlasting your opponent and like a battle of attrition, which you will always win if you use this properly. In the red ones, we have Bastion. This is to debuff shields. Sorcerers are prevalent this patch, so you do need this. Survival Instincts, Pain's Refuge and Sustain by Suffering. These three are staples. And in the green ones, it's whatever you like. Steed's Blessing is a good choice, and just other stuff to go with there. Now, for the sets and stuff, and if you haven't done so, I would say subscribe so you can see the gameplay that's coming out very, very soon. And as always, a huge thanks to everybody at Patreon. If you want to support myself, get early access and so on, there's details down below. But for these sets, what are we using? We are using the Master's Dual Wield for this. We have a Charged and a Sharpened. On the Charged one, we use an Absorb Stamina Glyph. That procs Minor Breach, which is 3,000 penetration. That is really nice. We then have Sharpened, which is just more penetration. So we need an Absorb Stamina Glyph, and you want a Poison Glyph. The Poison status is an extra status effect, which does get buffed by our passives as a Necromancer, which is awesome, and is also a Pseudo Execute. I then use the Vate Destro, so the Wrath of Elements. I use an Ice Staff on this, and I have Defending. This, when we cast Elemental Susceptibility on the back bar, what will happen is we put a big laser, and that will damage the person and anybody caught in between me and that laser. So that beam kind of just does loads of free damage. It costs nothing to cast, it procs status effects, it's free damage. It's kind of a no-brainer really. I then use poisons in the back bar. So something that gives you sustain, like draining poisons are really good, or more specialised poisons. You can pick what you choose. Good options though are like trapping for the immobilize, debilitation, which is quite good for just snaring them. But I prefer the draining, they're the most consistent, and I like the sustain. For the helmet, we use the Joral of the Mountains War Chief set. This is very, very good. It's also really awkward to use if you don't know how to play with it. So what does it do? It gives you weapon and spell damage on the one piece, and dealing damage applies a stack of malady to your enemy, reducing the healing received by 1% for 5 seconds. Up to 35 stacks. So what that actually means is when you hit somebody with this set in a 1v1, this will proc every half second. So within about 15-20 seconds, it's at max stats, and they will now lose 35% of their heals. It is a massive, massive reduction. Losing 35% of your heals is really hard to play against, trust me. And as a Necromancer, we have access to Blighted Blast Bones, which procs the minor Defile, which is healing debuff, and it procs Major Defile, which is also healing debuff. So we get the 12% on the Major, and because we proc the Disease, which is the minor, we end up getting Major and Minor Defile on this, which means we get loads and loads of healing reductions. So we'll get into combat, and then I'll show you kind of what it does, and it's just really, really nasty, really horrible to fight against. The other thing that's also worth noting with these sets is the weights. You want to make sure that you've got a medium helmet and a medium shoulder. I then pair this with Wretched Vitality as a crafted set because we do need sustain. When you use the Jarrell of the Mountains War Chief set, you do need a bit more extra sustain because you have to spam heals a little bit more. And as I mentioned with the CP, the reason we use Focus Mending is to offset that. That's 10% healing there, which means when we are using this set, yes, we do get up to 15% loss healing, but it's not that much now. You end up losing about 300 or 400 on each heal compared to you would normally, so you can sustain with this. And because we have so many heal skills like the Blood Craze, the Spirit Ghost, the Vigor, and the Resistant Flesh, we have a lot of healing coming in anyway. So that makes this actually viable to run. And against other players, you will outlast them because they cannot heal. You get them low health and they're losing 50% of their healing. It is a massive reduction. With the second set though, as we said, it was Wretched Vitality. So we have a heavy chest, we have a light waist and medium hands, heavy legs and medium feet. I've gone with Reinforce on the chest and the legs this time and Impen on everything else. If you get more experience with the build, you can then change some of these Impens to well fitted and have say 3 well fitted and the rest all Impen, or go for a mix. But start with Impen and then move it to well fitted as you get more experience. For the jewellery, we have one piece Trainee for extra health and one piece Druid. Druid Braid is a crafted set. This is another 1200 health. We then pair this with Death Dealer's Feet, and all of these are infused weapon damage glyphs. On the body pieces, you would have seen that it's all tri-stat, so head, chest, legs are the kind of the minimum, and then if you can afford the rest, go for the others because it does help. But you could just put these as stamina and magic and mix between them. But you do want tri-stat on the head, the chest, and the legs. The extra health is helpful. But that's the sets, that's the build. I'd like to know what you think of it. If you've got any questions, let me know down below. As always, if you like what I do here, then like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I want to say a massive thank you to all the people on Patreon. If you want to support myself there, there's details down below. You get early access and much more. But as always, I'm going to catch you in the next video or on the next stream. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care, and bye!